to Canada, a user's guide and owner's manual.
Many people want to fix this broken down machine called government. So join with me every week as we create an owner's manual to help people understand what these parts are, how they're supposed to fit together, and how to troubleshoot, maintain, and fix this broken down machine.
Well, good evening and welcome to another episode of Canada, a user's guide and owner's manual. And tonight I have the pleasure of having my daughter Chelsea Hilliard join with me to talk about one of the unseen and little known aspects of politics and government in Canada, and indeed most of the Western world. And it is that layer of the political parties that actually control it. And these are the lobbyists. We might say, in 1863, Abraham Lincoln came out with that famous phrase during his Gettysburg Address: government by the people, for the people, and of the people. As now, I don't think many people believe that phrase was is still relevant today in our representative democracies. It's more government for the wealthy, by the wealthy, and of the wealthy. And it is the lobbyists who are often the intermediaries between the wealthy and our representative democracy. So hope you enjoy tonight's show. Of course, if you like to help support the show, we receive no government funding for this. You can donate to the production at nomorlockdowns.ca. As well as if you have questions that you want to have specifically answered during our episodes, send them to my website, randyhillier.com, ask a question, and we'll have those links included in the video, as well, of course, share, like, and subscribe. And due to the overwhelming amount of censorship, even on the absolutist free platform like X, which isn't so absolute anymore, follow me on my Substack page where there actually is no censorship yet. So with that, thanks for joining me, Chelsea, and let's talk about lobbyists in Canada.
So, yeah, I think you and I were speaking about things that we could be talking about that are important and of the moment. And I think one of the things that we came to was sort of the rise of this new form of lobbyist that we're seeing happen right now. And so that's sort of the genesis of this episode that my dad and I have decided to do. So with that, I think, since my dad, Randy, was in politics for so long, I think it should be an opportunity for him to sort of introduce what even is a lobbyist, what do they do, what role do they play, how influential, are they in our politics, both provincially and federally, and likely municipally as well.
Yeah, not so much municipally, but absolutely 100% federally and provincially. And the political parties are never-ending animals. Elected members come and go, but the lobbyists are sort of like the entrenched bureaucracy within a government. They just keep going; they never stop. The lobbyists are. We've all heard the term. The money is the grease or the oil of that keep the wheels of politics going. And lobbyists are the ones that make sure that that money does go. But they've really become far more influential than just providing money. So for those who haven't been involved with politics or seen how this works, um, the lobbyists are always intermediaries. They are on retainer by very wealthy corporate interests, generally speaking. And they bring the interests of their wealthy clients to the political parties. Uh, and they advance the interests of those wealthy corporate interests and ensure that the political parties advance those interests um, and they do this in very subtle and sophisticated ways. Um, they wine and dine the individual members and um, uh, bestow many platitudes um, and perks and privileges, wine and dine them, take them out to Maple Leaf hockey games or the Blue Jays. Um, but even more than that, they actually are the campaign teams, the campaign managers for the political parties. Um, and they're the ones who orchestrate who will be the leaders of the party, as well as which members will advance within the political party or which members may be removed if they're um, not towing the party line.
Yeah. So in that regard, before we get into like the scope of influence that they actually have within the parties, who are the lobbyists? Who are these people who are hired to be these intermediaries?
Well, again, they're often very well connected individuals. Generally speaking, they're either former staff members of the um, elected members, um, or even former elected members as well. Often go into a lobbyist role afterwards. Um, but typically mostly are staffers who are very well connected. Um, that's who they are, um, and you know, uh, and they've learned the trade craft of politics during their time as staffers or as members, and they've learned how to peddle or parlay their access and knowledge um, of the system to wealthy corporate interests, um, and um, and they become well nowadays. I would say, unfortunately, they become essential or integral into the way our political system actually works. Most elected members will speak far more frequently with lobbyists than they ever will with the voters who actually voted for them.
And can I ask a question that might seem like very silly? Like I should absolutely know the answer to this, but like, you know, I know about a whole industry called government relations. Is government relations just another term for lobbyists, or is there a subtle difference between those things?
There's there's a difference without distinction.
Okay.
Government relations lobbyists, it's all you'll see every one of these firms will um, I guess they use the term government relations um, to deflect the negativity of the term lobbyists.
Okay.
But
So it's just
that's
a way to abuse language and convolute our understanding of what's going on,
yeah,
basically.
just to confuse and to obscure what they're actually doing.
Okay.
So, but we've seen, that's who they are. Uh,
they're all on retainer from their wealthy corporate interests. They use those retainers to, like I said, to wine and dine and flatter elected members and extol the virtues of the member with platitudes. They become very sophisticated, very suave, and very polished.
So I have a question. I have a question for you because, and I think that people are probably pretty interested because you have like direct knowledge and experience with this because you were an elected member. Like, do you have, I'm not trying to tell you to out anyone or whatever, but like, do you have any stories about times that you personally were lobbied so that you can sort of take this from like an existential idea of lobbyists to the personal?
Well, there's an interesting one, and that is the first time I met a lobbyist. It took me quite a number of months before I realized he was a lobbyist. Like, that's how good these people are. I had no idea that he was actually being paid by somebody else to come and talk to me about various things, and that's sort of like the gradual incremental way these guys work. They don't tell you that they're being paid by Galen Weston and Loblaws or by David Thompson and Thomson Reuters. They just, they're very friendly, personable people, and they're interested in public policy, and they, so.
And I imagine they get funneled through, right? Because they might get in your ear because they're in the ear of someone like a colleague of yours that you trust or are friends with, and so then they sort of get funneled through the pipeline of elected members.
Yeah, and this is where they look like party operatives. They look like party people, and it's obscured. Like, and the first one was like Stu Kiff, and I know you've met Stu Kiff,
yeah.
And that's who I'm referring to. Like, he's a nice guy.
Yeah, he's very nice.
Very nice guy. But it took me a number of months before I realized that he was a lobbyist. Okay, well, and listen, lobbyists, like politicians and like everybody else, they come in different shapes and sizes and qualities and calibers. And Stu was a very nice guy and very professional. But he was also the president of one of the the conservative riding associations in Toronto. So they sort of transcend it. There's no defined boundaries with these people. But there's one example. Like, it was probably 6 months before I found out that there was another part to his agenda.
It's funny that you actually bring him up because I think that, like, I actually, like, I know that was his role, was as a lobbyist, but he's so wonderful and so friendly and so personable that when I think of him, I don't think of lobbyist. I just think of Stu because he's like the coolest. He's like the coolest guy in the room, So yeah, I think, I mean, it's been many years since I've seen him now, but that is, lobbyist is certainly not what comes to my mind when I think of him.
Yeah, listen, these guys never come into your office and say, "Hi, I'm Corey Tonight, and I am a lobbyist for X, for AstraZeneca vaccines or Pfizer or Moderna." That's not how you will know them through their roles in the party, through their interactions with the party. And it's only when you start inquiring and looking into things that you realize, okay, there is another part of the agenda here that isn't being overtly stated.
Mhm.
So
Okay, so let's get into that. So, like, I know you can speak to certain political parties and the lobbyists that sort of control them more so than others, right? Because you existed in a conservative space. So, and you just mentioned one big lobbyist, Corey Tenike. So, like, let's get into sort of like who some of the big lobbyists are in Canadian politics, whether it's provincial, like Ontario Conservative provincial or federal, and and sort of discuss what their roles are and how they impact.
So Corey's a
our
good
democracy.
example. Yeah, Corey tonight is a great example. He was a former director of communications for Stephen Harper's Federal Conservative Party. He became the campaign manager for Doug Ford's leadership race, along with another former Harper conservative, Chris Froggatt. And they ran Doug Ford's leadership campaign. When Doug Ford won the leadership, both Chris and Corey started up their own lobbyist firms in Toronto to effectively lobby Doug Ford, who they are the campaign managers for. And when Doug Ford became premier, and so and that's what they did. So and maybe I'll just show a screenshot of Rubicon, and just to give people
Go through some of the names.
Yeah. So here's Rubicon's website, and you can see here Corey Tenike is the principal. Patrick Harris, the guy beside.
Can I jump in for 1 second? Because Corey Tenike, I find him a very interesting person because he also came from media.
Oh yes. So after he left, this is again where the lines get blurry and obscured and difficult. So Corey was the vice president of Sun Media when they launched. After he left Stephen Harper's employment, he became vice president of Sun Media and ran Sun Media for a while. And then when that folded up, he became campaign manager for Doug Ford. Next to him is Patrick Harris, and that was another fellow I dealt with awful lot in Toronto. He was a staffer during the John Tory period of time in Ontario politics. But beside him, you see David Hurley. And David Hurley is a wonderful fella as well. And he was a campaign manager for both Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne for the Liberal Party. So the lobbyist firms, they're the quintessential uniparty. They have people from all political stripes because they want access to all parties, and they want to be able to trade their access to the politicians to benefit their corporate clients. And even here, the next one, Michael Coates, he was the executive director of the Ontario PC Party as well. And as you go through all the names, there's an interesting one is Don Newman. He was a former, of course, longtime CBC journalist. But these names you'll see
quite often, and and that's just one of the firms that is very prolific in Ontario, and increasingly into federal politics as well. But here's another part of what we've seen is, not only are these people the campaign managers and the lobbyists and the government relations people um, for their clients, but they also sit in on the caucus meetings so they are viewed as a component of caucus. And I've also seen them actually sit in on cabinet meetings. And for those who aren't aware, like the cabinet meeting is historically been strictly for members of cabinet and no one else. But the lobbyists now are not only in caucus, but they're in the cabinet meetings as well.
So that seems very worrying to me, because now you've got corporate interest, running sort of the back end of political parties, and now also being involved in discussions about policy, legislation, bills to be introduced, that kind of thing. So like this seems like a very dangerous precedent set. Like, how long do you think this has been going on?
Well, I think it's been evolving. And I think it's been evolving in a bad way, in an increasingly involved way. Back when when we had leader races that were delegated conventions, for example, the lobbyists didn't have much avenue to get in. But when we went to the one member, one vote systems, that really opened the door for the lobbyists to insert themselves in the leadership campaigns. We've been seeing, I think, the lobbyists being involved because they always have these dual roles or triple roles. Corey and Chris and these people could come to caucus either as a GR, government relations, or as a lobbyist, or as the campaign team. Because they wore all these different disguises, they could obscure and get around the conflict of interest rules.
So like when you start to look at like the various initiatives, for example, I think we'll talk about Ontario for now because it's what you and I know best, especially you. Like when you look at the initiatives being put in place right now, whether it's I mean not even right now, but for a number of years. So whether it's the developing the green belt, or development housing initiatives, or creating new highways, those kinds of things, like those are all, I imagine that those are not organic issues that have just, that are the will of the people. Those are issues, policies that have sprung up from these corporate lobbyists who are running the party.
That's right. Yeah, like it's not like there was no hue and cry from the people saying, we either wanted a green belt or we didn't want a green belt in Ontario. This was pressures by very wealthy developers to enhance their profitability by having their lands and properties zoned in a manner that would make them more profitable, and having other properties of their competitors zoned in a way that would make them less competitive and less profitable.
So would I be right or wrong to assume that that there would be a lobbyist for a developer in the sort of green belt who would then not go to Doug Ford, but who would go to someone like Corey Tonight or Chris Froggatt or Dean French, and so they would go to them, lobby the lobbyist who's already inside the party, and then they would go to Doug Ford and lobby on behalf of them.
Yeah, they
Is
would.
that
They
sort
would.
of how it works?
Yeah, they would go to. So let's say, and I'm just going to say hypothetical, but let's say Mattamy Homes,
Yeah.
one of the largest home builders, is sitting on a couple of thousand acres outside of Toronto, and he can't build on it because it's been zoned by the municipality uh, um, for farmland.
Mhm.
So, you know, and we're talking about millions, multi-millions of dollars of value if it was zoned as residential. So that person might call up somebody like Corey Tonight and say, Corey, I need to get a couple of thousand acres rezoned from farm and agricultural into um, um, residential. Uh, would you be able to do that for me? And somebody like Corey or Chris would say, yeah, I could have a sit down and chat with Doug privately, and the Minister of Housing, um, and if you want to give me $100,000 a month to do this, and give me a bonus commission of $1 million or $10 million if I get the property rezoned, I can make that happen. But give me $100,000 a month to start. And Buddy, who's sitting on that property that would go from $5,000 an acre to $5 million an acre, says, well, okay, that's a worthwhile endeavor. And it's the same with building highways. That's a very lucrative lobbying. There's only a few big road construction firms in Ontario, and somebody may say, I really would like to get this contract to build the 407 extension or the 413 extension, or and Corey, would you be able to put in a good word for me with Doug, and can we how can you help me make sure that I get that contract?
Right. So it's like, I mean, it's what we all know, but these are the inner workings of it, is that it's all money. It's just money.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that can seem fairly depressing for a lot of people. To know that if you don't have an in with these people who are the lobbyists who are working within the parties, then like you're not going to be able to grow to what you potentially would like to, if you do without these connections, and that there's other people who have these connections who you're not going to ever be able to touch. But just in the interest of time, I wanted to talk quickly, or not quickly, whatever, about how some of these lobbyists who are campaign managers or within the party, especially the Ontario Progressive Conservatives, there was a sort of mass booting of caucus members within the OPC over the last 4 or 5 years, including yourself. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what role these lobbyists played in having you and multiple others removed from caucus.
Yeah. So once again, the lobbyists um, be or have all these multiple roles, and you can't really distinguish which one that they're playing on any particular time. But I can say to the audience, and it's very clear, I was very outspoken about the role of lobbyists in the Conservative government, and Chris Froggatt and Corey Tenike orchestrated my removal from the caucus, um, because they didn't want these things that they're doing to be exposed and to be known by the general public. Um, but it was also others like um, Belinda Karahalios, Lindsay Parks, anybody, Roman Babber, anybody who opposed the COVID mandates or the vaccine mandates, especially because these guys are also
Nichols as well.
yeah, and we should put up. We'll put up a clip of Rick in a moment.
Yeah.
But people who were opposing the vaccine mandates, these campaign managers, these lobbyists, are also the intermediaries for Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, and they want to protect their clients, and they want to protect their clients' profitability, and the more they can do that, the more valuable they are to their clients. So, do we have that? Yeah, let's
I'll
put
put
it.
up so just Rick Nichols was the 10-year MPP for Chatham-Kent Leamington, wonderful riding down in far southwestern Ontario. He was also the deputy House Speaker, and here is him just before he was booted from caucus. So here's what he had to say:
to exercise this autonomy over my own body while continuing to work hard for the people of Ontario. 3 days ago, I received a call from the campaign manager for the Ontario PC 2022 re-election campaign. Unfortunately, in a demeaning tone, this individual threatened that I will be expelled from the Ontario PC caucus if I do not vaccinate by 5 p.m. today. Expulsion means leaving the government benches and may result in the loss of my office as Deputy Speaker. Now, over the past 10 years, I've always strived to do the right thing. For the last 18 months, I watched with great sadness not only the effect of COVID, but the remarkable health, mental impacts, and economic toll on our government's pandemic response.
So, yeah, there you go. He didn't mention by name, but he said the campaign manager called him. And I can say to you in the audience, the campaign manager for the 2022 campaign is Corey Tenike, the same campaign manager who's for 2018 and for Ford's leadership race, and who is the principal owner of Rubicon Strategies, and you can go through the lobbyist registry and see all the very wealthy pharma companies and others that he represents. So he's being paid by them to be in on caucus, being paid by them to be in on cabinet meetings, to advance their agendas, and to control who says what within the party and what legislation gets put forward.
To imagine that someone like Corey Tenike has the power to basically strip someone of their elected status. They were elected, like Rick Nichols was elected by the people. Yep. I know the people behind your ousting. Yep. Again, you had been elected for 15 years by the people. To think that these people who are solely representing corporate interests have the ability to take out someone who apparently has been democratically elected it's insane. I think that people sort of have an idea that this is going on, but they don't really understand how it all
Well, they also have the power to take out the leader.
Right. Which
And
which we've seen happen multiple times, especially we saw it federally with the Liberals and for a number of years until they finally got Trudeau in. And then we saw it with the Conservatives. I mean, the whole time that you were in elected office, I mean, you had 4 different leaders over a fairly short
years.
Yeah.
And Justin Trudeau will be taken out by the lobbyists. It's not his decision. He will be removed, and I suspect this week. He will be removed, and it'll be, the caucus has a part of that, but it'll be the lobbyists who have the major role in that. But one of the troubling developments as we're seeing this, lobbyists have been this disguised and covert part of our political system in our government for some time, but now it's also becoming overt. And recently, like in the last week or two, that we've seen how Elon Musk has done away with the intermediaries. He doesn't need a lobbyist now for him. He is part of Trump's transition team.
Well, so this is how we got to this topic, right? To speak about what sort of the rise of Musk. I'm sorry to do this. I just want to go back half a second, because I think that there's an interesting little part of the getting rid of the leaders. So, and I just want to hit on this really, really quickly. So Andrew Scheer was selected to be the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, and I don't want to shill for anyone right now, but Maxime Bernier probably should have won that election, but Andrew Scheer did, or whatever, because of the dairy cartel lobbyists. So he was basically selected by them because of them. Yep. And then we had him ousted when he was useless, and they brought O'Toole in. Now, Poilievre he originally was going to run in that leadership election, but then he dropped out. And I remember saying to you at the time that it felt very clear to me that what he was told by someone was, now is not your time. Sit down and wait for your turn. So they let O'Toole sort of take the L on that election. And then they said to Poilievre, okay, now is your time. Now you can go. And that's exactly what happened. That's all lobbyists doing that.
It's all O'Toole. Well, first off, with it was the lobbyists who mobilized the dairy farmers and to make sure that Max wouldn't win that leadership race, and that Scheer would. It was the lobbyists who told Pierre to sit out the next round. They had decided that O'Toole was their best shot at winning, and Pierre, he was musing publicly about running in that election against O'Toole, but within a couple of weeks he said no. He was told where his place was, and then when O'Toole flubbed and floundered, then the lobbyists said, okay, now it's your turn, Poilievre, and so
let's take off your glasses, let's put some tighter t-shirts on, let's
remake you,
let's bring it home. Whatever, So I just wanted to sort of squeeze that in there before we get into Elon Musk, because I think that Elon Musk and what he's doing is really sort of the the genesis of why you and I decided to choose this topic for tonight, because it's very much pertinent to what's going on right now